This morning's meeting to go here. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, we had a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next thing we've got is citizens to be heard. Is there anybody in the audience wants to be talked about? Okay. You want to come forward and identify yourself, please?
My name is Dean Meyer. I live south of town on County Road 8. Jenny is actually my neighbor to the east of me. And I also know Paul previously. So biggest issue that I had was I live on Ditch 11.
North.
I'm the first place to the east of the railroad tracks, just east of Rusted. On the 13th, Jenny had texted me, asked me how the water situation was, and I said nothing going on at that time, but the biggest problem that has always been there since I've lived there for 9 years, I've had higher water, but I've never had water like this year. The issue has always been the culverts starting at the railroad tracks to the river. Railroad track is a bottleneck, and everything backs up, and the water gets high in our yard. Previously, I've had water trickle over the driveway couple inches for a few hours, and that's about it. When she texted me, she said that somebody was going to be coming to clean the ditches. I had to head out of town on the 14th. I left at 4 o'clock. Somebody from Fitzgerald was cleaning ditches. The biggest issue is that he started 2 miles east of me and was working to the east. Talked with him for 4 days. The next day, Saturday, they came back out, I guess. Or no, they didn't get anybody to come on Saturday. Sunday, they cleaned, but they did not go to the river to open things up. You can't let water out if you don't open the culvert at the river. So when he started working on Sunday, he started working at County Road 7 to the west. Complete opposite, again, of anything of any knowledge that anybody has. To let water out, you have to start at the river. And in the end, he never did end up cleaning the culvert at the river. He sent me a video on Monday morning saying the culvert at the river was open. But I can tell you for a fact on Sunday evening on my way home, the excavator was sitting at Walker's, and it was still there on Monday morning. The culvert was never opened at the river. Water finally released Tuesday sometime. Highest water I ever had. Sat with water running board deep on my truck the whole way out of my yard. If there was any type of emergency whatsoever, I would have been, I won't say it, but you know what. There's no way any emergency crews would have entered my yard at all. So I don't understand how, and I don't know if it's a county issue or if it's a watershed issue, but I can't understand how anybody that's instructed to clear the ditch would start in the middle and work to the east. I chewed his butt for probably 4 days straight every day. And his comments were, the people to the east of you are having issues. I said, yeah, that's fine. But if you don't open the river, they're going to have issues again 3 days later because it's going to back up in my yard and it's going to continue to back up. So I don't understand that from a viewpoint of cleaning ditches. You can't start in the middle.
Mr. Chair, I can maybe add a little bit of context to this if it's helpful. Dean and I had been in a lot of communication about this, and I think the conversations we'd had with our county engineer, who's here, Justin, and then Matt from the watershed, when he alluded to the fact that I reached out, I had called the watershed after having been there on Monday. I called them 2 days later to let them know some of the hot spots previously around that area because there are newer folks at the watershed, and told them specifically that the railroad is a major problem and that if that's not open, the amount of water from Thingvolds, who are about 2 miles east of the Myers, those properties will go under if it's not opened at the railroad. And unfortunately, as said, the excavators were maybe out a couple days too late, and they did choose to open upstream, which ended up just slamming Myers with all of that water with nowhere to go. I think, Justin, we were in a lot of conversation, and it's unfortunate that it happened that way. I know this is a watershed issue because it is, the watershed controls the ditch, but it's just frustrating because it did put too much pressure on a system that's supposed to work quite well. It just didn't.
I was never concerned about my house. My house was put at a level, it's the same level as the highway, so I was never worried about my house. But it's a simple fact of, if there would have been a fire or a medical emergency, nobody would have gotten into my yard for anything.
And I think too, because it happened a few days too late, it was going to flood a home. And so when the second contact was made to the watershed, when they were digging east of you, that house went up substantially. He had water on his shop overnight, and it was going to flood their house. So then you just,
And I can
Facing
understand
your
that
tail at
starting
that
there,
point,
but
yeah.
then when you
Stopping.
go back out, you don't work towards the river. You have to go down to the river to open things up and let it all out.
Well, I don't know what to do with that. I mean, this watershed's problem, not watershed's problem, it's our problem, I guess. But, I mean, the watershed is the one who is opening the ditch, and they hired Fitzgerald to do it, so evidently he didn't do it properly, so I don't know what more we're supposed to do now. It's just, I mean, it's an unfortunate thing, that's for sure.
Well, Mr. Chair, being in an area that flooded significantly in the past, in my experience at the township level, you're 100% correct in terms of if you don't relieve it where it's supposed to go to start with, all you're doing is you might be temporarily fixing one problem, but it's still gonna hit that blocking point and just fill right back in. But it seems to me, over the years, when you look at it, whether it's municipalities that have experienced flooding or, townships along the river that have experienced flooding, you come up with a system in place as to when you should start doing things. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of goes to the point here that maybe there needs to be some discussion amongst our county engineers and the watershed to maybe come up with more of a preemptive plan moving forward so that you can avoid some of these things. Because I remember County Road 90, I remember as a township supervisor coming to the county board at the time regarding County Road 93, and that was the same issue. The culvert right at County Road 93 and in County 96, or at the time I think it was County 93 and County 3. That culvert was blocked, and everything to the east, all as far to the east, was just full of water, but it couldn't get to that release point. And they had been digging ditches, but they forgot to dig the most important ditch.
And this year he couldn't, nobody could have come out a week ahead of time because with that snowstorm
Right.
before Easter, it would have blown back in.
And that's the other thing.
But
Yeah.
knowing that those are issues, I do feel somebody should have been out there right after that, beginning of the week.
Yeah.
And I'll say that Myers moved a home in from South Fargo to that property, and that is a property that has flooded in the past, but they built the home higher than ever before. That I think your house is, the top of the basement is level with the road. So they were proactive in that. The problem with that property is that the amount of overland flooding that they get from the south and east just compounds if that ditch isn't properly working anyhow. So then when you double the amount of water that they're getting.
And that's on that's right along 8.
Yep.
And that's a significant drainage ditch along 8.
Yep.
Yes, it is.
That's a significant one. So, and again, we have ones that are more of a neighborhood type of ditch, but then you have ones that really are collector ditches. And if I recall correctly, 8 is a collector that
Yes.
brings in a lot of water. And, and again, this goes to, we can't help you now for what's done.
No.
But for future planning and maybe looking at what, making sure when we want to relieve some of these issues, if you got to look at the really arterial ones, that are, can really create backup for a long ways.
And when it did open, when the culvert finally opened on its own right at the river there, that ditch was half as full within less than a day. I
Right.
mean, on Monday night, I could tell that it must have started opening because I could see it was down a little bit. But by Tuesday morning, that ditch was 3/4 full. It was down that low already, just for the simple fact of that it opened. So that is, the key is the culvert at the river. You can't open 17 tributaries into one spot and not open the one that
But also
releases it.
the problem with the leapfrogging that happened is half of that ditch is still blocked. And so you have the whole
Yes,
coulee that is still holding back water
Because
because it
east
wasn't
of you.
properly opened on the culverts. And reaching out to the watershed last week, they said we have no intent in opening it.
yeah, because east of you last night, yeah, there's still snowpack and ice pack that's holding the water back on the south side out in the fields.
Clearly, we seem to have, our flooding issues seem to start in the southern part of the county and work its way north, and probably early on, that emphasis should be where the first problems are to happen, so I, moving forward, I think a communication, and I think bringing Gabe Tweeten into this discussion, as a person that really is involved with the emergency management plan, could be helpful to, and I've also said no two floods are the same. Next year, your area could be fine, and a significant ditch 2 miles from you could be the real culprit. So we only have so many backhoes too, to open things up.
I know in the past, because I worked with Matt Opsahl at, I think it's Matt Opsahl.
Wade.
Or Wade Opsahl, sorry, Wade Opsahl at Houston Engineering. When I set my house, he came out and marked to make sure we had proper elevation. And I had his cell phone, and he always said, if you have problems with the ditch, give him a call and he'll get somebody out there. And he was very responsive in that he would get somebody out there basically immediately to open it. And I guess my understanding is Matt, who's in charge of it now, is newer. And I don't know if it's an education issue, but anytime that I've brought it up in discussions with individual with our water issue, everybody made the same comment. Well, aren't they doing it backwards of the way they should do it? And they're just normal citizens.
Yeah, appreciate you coming. I guess you're the second I've heard that is similar thing has happened. And again, it's not perfect world out there, but to what Commissioner Campbell was talking about, Jenny's kind of mentioned, I think this is fresh in our minds right now. We need to take note of it. Again, that coordination with Justin and I do think part of it is the newness of Matt getting going. But I think there may have been, we just need to make sure the communication also is working between Matt or the watershed and their people, the people digging out the ditch, are they in line with that communication? Because the other incident I'm aware of, there was miscommunication that created a little havoc. So again, hopefully we can just be more coordinated next year. That's,
My goal is to go to the watershed meeting
yeah.
in a week and a half and voice my concerns with them also.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, it's all after the fact now, but it's just,
Well, yeah, and with Paul's comment that it's fresh in everybody's mind, that's why I wanted to come today, to voice what occurred and frustration with what happened this year, so that hopefully in the future there are no issues.
Just a suggestion, City of Moorhead has a playbook. And when floods are, before anything happens, it's broken up by timeline and by priority. And there's 350, 370 items that they've identified over the years with floods that they need to do, and they have it down the sequence that needs to be done. And if Bob Zimmerman's doing it, I think all of us know it's pretty well thought through, but I would encourage, when we discuss this with the watershed, it's a new guy. We have a good county engineer, and we have a good county emergency director. And if people can sit down and just start working on that playbook. When I worked for the city of Moorhead, we started back in 2007. There were people there that, or we started back when I was there in 2007, but the 1997 flood, I believe. There were some experienced people there, and they just sat down and they started saying, what do we need to do in the future? And what changes do we need to make? And it's a step that you do more in July than in February and March, is sitting down and coming up with a playbook on the sequence you need to do. And it sounds like you got caught where they didn't have a playbook. And it could have been a lot worse. We ducked a bullet on this flood, and if it had come the way we were anticipating it, you probably would have had big problems. And I see where this is a topic that needs to be discussed, and future response needs to be lesson learned from this one. I appreciate you bringing it in.
And I would agree, like, with your comment and with what Mr. Campbell said, that there are high volume priority ditches that in that playbook should be a top priority to make sure that they are open to release larger amount of water instead of smaller ones or whatever it might be that may have been worked on. I don't know if that occurred at all, but I think both of your comments there with higher volume ditches in your playbook would be a very wise decision. That something should be put together between the county and the watershed to make sure that everything in the future is kind of set out on what gets addressed first. Thank you, everybody.
Just a follow-up, we did go to the watershed before, both Commissioner Krabenoff and I and our emergency manager and our county engineer, to kind of smooth out any wrinkles and make sure there was understanding. Unfortunately, there wasn't. I don't want to get calls from people in crisis ever again that an entity said, not my problem, good luck, which happened several times. So I know, Justin, you were in a lot of communication and hoping we can get this smoothed out so that this is not the case in the future.
Well, I know we discussed sometime before, I thought the watershed wasn't gonna clean any ditches, but they must have been out there cleaning ditches. So, and that's why you guys went to the meeting, wasn't it?
Right, after that, they weren't going to. After the meeting, they were. We'll figure it out.
Okay, that's definitely something we have to work on, so. Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any citizens concern? Anybody in the computer that,
No, Mr. Chair.
okay. Okay, we move on to the payment of bills and vouchers.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to approve the bills. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And we'll move on to approval of the minutes from April the 11th.
Move for approval.
Got a motion to approve the minutes from April 11th.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Get a flood update from Justin. I don't know, Gabe's not here today, I don't think.
Yes, good morning. So I'm here for the flood update. So this past week was a lot slower than the previous week. There was some closures along the Red River in both Holy Cross Township and Cragness and Georgetown Townships. In total, we had 38 damaged sites, which vary in length, some being just a minor area to a couple hundred feet. So we did start fixing what we were able to in the Barnesville area yesterday as the waters come down significantly, and we are working our way north. As a county, we ended up digging out a total of 15 spots, some being a couple hundred feet, some being a couple miles. We hired both contractors and our own backhoe to do these 15 spots. Overall, I think we handled this event very well from a county-wide perspective, and I'd just like to thank all my staff for their hard work throughout this. And water is coming down pretty much everywhere, even in the Cragness area. 96 is out. It's typically underwater. It's now above water. We just need to fix some washout areas.
Justin and I went out, drove around Spring Prairie Township, and there was, I mean, no water over the roads, but it was just bad roads, you know. So, I know that one road we drove on about 15 miles per hour is our top speed, so that's a tough road to drive on.
And I guess just to piggyback off the previous citizen concern, so we as a county did identify some trouble spots along the watershed system, and we did give them a list on ditches that have been dug out in the past. And then on that particular one, both Jenny and I did reach out to the watershed, and in my communication, I did tell them that the railroad is usually the bottleneck and kind of the problem area.
Well, the other spot I had in problem was the interstate was the problem there.
Yep.
On 50th Street there, it's just problems, I don't know, I guess because the ditches weren't open up, I guess. They caused problems. That's all.
Yeah, just a question. So we were declared emergency, right?
Yep.
Okay, so how does that work, just in a quick view, how does that work for reimbursement for the work you do?
So I don't know, Gabe knows the exact number, but we have to hit a certain threshold. It's around 160,000 in damage, and that's not just Clay County. That can be the city of Moorhead, Buffalo Red. And at that point, it's a state emergency. So the state would pay 75% of the costs, and the county would pick up 25, or the watershed would pick up 25. And then somewhere in the 250,000, I'm just guessing here, I don't know the exact number, then it could become a federal disaster, but it would have to be declared as such. And then it's, federal would pick up 75%, state would pick up 25%.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify that the federal's 290, and I believe the governor has a press conference today. I don't know if that's what he's going to be touching on in regards to floods, the flooding in the state of Minnesota, so we may have an answer later this morning on that.
And I don't, from a county perspective, that first week, when we're out barricading and such, so a lot of that isn't eligible unless you're on overtime. So if guys are closing roads in the middle of the night, that can be reimbursable. But most of our reimbursable expenses come once you start fixing these spots. And then obviously for the contractors that we had dig out ditches, that's all eligible as well.
I did, Mr. Chair, I did get a report from Gabe last week before he, end of the week, and at that point, but without the city of Moorhead's information, we were at $177,000 already in eligible expenses. So hopefully we'll have a declaration.
And since then, since Gabe sent that out, we did get a couple of our invoices from contractors, which added about another 30,000. And then now that we're starting to fix some of these areas, we'll be able to have a running total each week. So wouldn't doubt that we'll get close to that federal threshold.
Right, considering you probably don't have those invoices from the watershed
No.
issues.
Any other questions? Okay. Then we'll go into your supply bid.
Yeah, so the second item I have is for the approval of the yearly supply bids. So the first item is corrugated metal culverts, bituminous mixture, and rental of construction equipment. So this, we collect a bunch of different bids for things that we can utilize throughout the year. Obviously, we buy many culverts throughout the year. If we need to patch a road, we buy asphalt. And then also in such things as flood events, we do rent construction equipment if needed. So this is, we approve all bids, and it's basically a list that we can utilize throughout the year if we need to buy pipe or rent a backhoe or buy asphalt. So I would be looking for approval of the yearly supply bids for both corrugated metal culvert, furnishing, bituminous mixture, and rental of construction equipment.
So moved.
Second motion.
You got a motion and a second to approve the bid, yearly supply bids, for the highway department. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And then the second part of the packet is the approval of the gravel bid for the 2023 regraveling. So we received 2 bids, one from Turner Sand and Gravel and one from Fitzgerald Construction. I would recommend approving low bid of Turner Sand and Gravel for townships 1 through 30 with a contingency on approval from Highland Grove Township, Hawley Township, and Tansem Township. So we had 3 townships join our gravel bid this year.
Okay,
For the contractor halls or for?
For the contractor halls, yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the graveling contracts 1 through 30 with the 30A amendment.
Second.
okay, we got a motion and a second to approve the gravel contracts for the 2023. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, request approval to replace vacated RN position. Our weekly candidate here, coming forward. Kathy?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I do have another vacated position in my family health area, unfortunately. So I need to replace that. Of course, it's budgeted. I'm down to 2 nurses in family health now, which is very low. We've never been down that low. We usually have 5 to 6 nurses in this area. So it's a challenge to recruit nurses, and we're short in our other areas as well. So definitely hope to be able to recruit. That's been a challenge. So I'll work with the HR director on that and see what kind of opportunities we have to do a better recruitment for RNs.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I have a question. In the memo, it's noted that each position has a caseload of 15 to 20 clients. How has the caseload changed over the past 5 years? Has it remained consistent?
With COVID, they went down, of course, because we weren't doing the home visits and we didn't have the numbers during COVID, but they're really ramping back up again now. So it's probably going to be on the order of about 20. That's a typical caseload.
And then for those positions, do they meet with their caseload clients once a week?
Yeah, there's 2 evidence-based programs we provide, and one is Nurse Family Partnership, and the other one is called MESH. And there's stringent requirements for, we meet with them when at the 3rd term of pregnancy, and so we meet there's a range of times we need to meet with them and how often during the week. And then once they deliver, there's other timeframes we need to meet. So each program has very specific timeframes. We also provide NICU referrals. We provide home visits for those NICU babies. And those are set by what the physicians would like us to visit with them. It's usually short term, just to make sure they're managing well, they don't have any issues, they're gaining weight and all those kinds of things. And that's a targeted home visiting that we provide. And so those vary depending on what the medical physician requests.
So has this person left already? Or
We'll be leaving in about a week and a half.
so have we got any applicants yet, or, I mean?
I previously, if you recall, I previously came to the board, it just feels like last week, for another person that left. And we do have, we have one that we offered a position to. We still have not received confirmation that that person is going to accept the position. And that's all we have for applicants at this point.
One other question, Mr. Chair. I think in the memo, you also say that we receive federal and state grant funds to fund the position and bill for third-party reimbursement. What percentage of this position is levy?
Typically, there isn't much percentage because we receive the funding through some grants, federal and state grants, and that they cover a portion. We have also an ability to bill for for some of the portions. So typically, we've come pretty, revenue expenses are pretty equal in the family home visiting program.
Thank you.
What are the board's wishes?
Move for approval of the request.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to approve the hiring of another RN position. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, okay,
Thank you very much.
good luck.
Thanks.
Hey, James, next, to fill an open juvenile counselor position.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm here today to request to refill a vacancy in our secure unit for a juvenile counselor position. The position's in our 2023 budget. And this individual, at least the one that's leaving, staying in the county, so that's good. Just going to a different department, so.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify, in the memo, it says, on the top, it says secure unit, and the bottom, it says non-secure. So the motion is for a replacement of secure.
Yep.
All right. So I'll offer that motion.
A second.
okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the hiring of the position.
Sure. Yeah, James, is there a need for backfill on this?
There might be, yes. I apologize if I,
My motion would reflect that as well.
Fine.
Okay. Okay, the motion is to hire with backfill. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Request approval of resolution 2023-13, establishment of the West Central Regional Water District and commencement of water system establishment proceedings. Rocky and Steve, I think.
Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned, we're here this morning for Resolution 2023-13. If you recall, over the last year, we've had multiple presentations from representatives from A2S, Norman County, Polk County, in regards to the formation of this water district. I think with each presentation, there came some questions from this board, and with each of those presentations came additional information. Again, just a reminder that this water district formation would bring safe, reliable working water to cities, roughly 16, two of those within Clay County, Georgetown and Felton, and roughly 15,000 rural citizens. And so I have Stephen Slick and Rocky Schneider here. We also online, we have Daniel Marks from Flattery and Hood, their legal counsel that's been working with Norman County or through Norman County. So this past week, based on Mr. Marks' comments, this commission had some discussion on the questions that you had the last time that they were here. We had clarification in regards to liabilities, potential costs of the project, and organizational structure of governance. It appeared last week that based on those discussions, you felt comfortable with the response that we received and asked that we brought forward this resolution today. The resolution has been reviewed by our county attorney's office and is good to be brought forward. And so with that, I would yield for any questions from the board or any comments from Rocky or Stephen.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you for this presentation or coming back again. I know we have had some questions in the past, and although those have been answered in terms of my concerns, except for I thought of one other issue, and it's about the water supply. And I think you had talked about in the past that additional resources for water will need to be brought into play as this thing develops and more people were to use it. Obviously, you need to have more resources. And I'm wondering when it comes to, when I was involved with the Wellhead Resource Protection Project for Moorhead, if I recall correctly, there's a hierarchy in terms of who has rights to aquifer water. Where would this organizations stand in that regard in terms of if there were to be a hierarchy for needing to access aquifer water?
That is a great question. I'm probably not going to be able to answer all of that for you today. I'm not as well versed in Minnesota water law, as far as water resources go. But the way that it works from where the source is coming from currently, you're permitted through the state, and it goes based on the age of your permits. Possibly Mr. Marks on the call may know a little bit more of how the hierarchy goes, may not. We typically don't see too many issues with it, because what would end up happening possibly, you may be using water from the city of Crookston or their permits. You may be using water from either city of Moorhead, West Fargo, another rural water district, different cities. So you'd be trying to use established permits already, and then you would petition the state, to get more water if you can. As far as the hierarchy goes and priority goes, I don't know that exact answer.
That goes to exactly why I asked the question, and because you might have a municipality who really protects their water supply, and there may be conflict in what they think should be done versus what this entity might think should be done. That's kind of why I asked that question.
Sure.
And then who, is that a decision at the state level then? I'm assuming that's what that would be.
If the municipalities, already have these permits in place and are permitted, I would imagine that they would have the hierarchy, being that these permits are coming in later and they still need to be approved. And they may not be approved. There's a very real chance that, the state or the DNR wouldn't approve permits if they feel the aquifer is vulnerable already. So I would think that they would choose to honor the existing permits and existing permit capacities prior to allowing, more municipal type permits to be had. And in that permitting process, there would, probably be aquifer studies, things of that nature, to make sure as little conflict arises as possible and to make sure that the water supply is there and what we think it is, so.
And Commissioner Campbell, just to clarify, this proposal has sort of the large vision with multiple phases and getting out to all rural users.
Yep.
And what you're talking about is good discussion, but that's sort of a future need, future discussion. This initial phase with initial pipelines that's proposed there, there's adequate water for that, just to clarify.
Yeah.
But as we expand the system, those issues are going to need to be considered and looked at.
Yeah, and I had some assumption to that fact, but I guess it gets into more of, how contentious those things might be. You brought up maybe Crookston might have a water supply, and this group might want to say, boy, we'd like to tap that, and Crookston might say no. I'm just, it's a hypothetical here is all, but then what, so that's what I'm just curious if there's a hierarchy that comes into play that can mitigate those types of things, so.
And I guess to that as well, with kind of the formation of the district and this district process, those things will be, evaluated and looked into more, A, as a PER is developed, and then B, as this district build out begins to happen, once we realize the full potential, full supply needed, then, you start going and looking at things like this, or things like that, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think Mr. Marks had something to add to that.
You have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe make sure we were addressing, Commissioner, your question, but I think we did. I think there is a hierarchy. I think it's too early to say what that hierarchy would be going forward in the future. And just contextually speaking, right, this district, no city has to participate in the district, right? Cities will have to formally elect to participate. And so the district, it's hard for me to imagine at this stage, the district being in a position where they would have the authority to trump a city in terms of access to a city's existing water supply, because the city would have to assent to coming into the district via resolution. So I don't know if that's helpful context, but
That's very helpful. Thank you. That's very helpful.
So if another city wants to go into this, they have to go through a request to get into, because I got a email from the Ullin Township and Cragness Township, both already this week, and I think you got them too, and,
Well,
Yeah.
I think that was residents, wasn't it?
yeah, residents, yes. Request.
that's correct, Commissioner. The cities will have to adopt formal resolutions joining the district and, allowing the district to, operate within the city's jurisdiction. And there's some other legal findings, and that process really hasn't been started yet, because we wanted to have the cities have something to join before they sign those resolutions.
Okay. Very good, thank you.
Mr.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we've had a lot of discussion on this, and I think that certainly has gained my support based on the dialogue that's gone on. And I look at the resolution, and I look at the sheet that's provided, and it talks about the cost, impact, and funding source, and that, that's to be determined. I think would be fairly safe to say that if we're going to ask to be involved with this, I think every county has invested something into this. I'm going to just put this out there as a discussion item, and my thought on this is we have received through the local assistance in tribal fund, it's ARPA dollars that we received. We received an allocation from 2022 and from 2023, and we have not used those allocations yet. I believe the amount was $50,000 each year. And it seems to me that it would be appropriate for us to maybe look at reserving some of that for this purpose. And because we're kind of uncertain at this time of what that dollar amount would be, and we always kind of be financially responsible in terms of where we'd come up with the money. This is another form of ARPA money that gives us some discretion. And I think it's beneficial for certainly the northern part of Clay County for now, and potentially more. So I think maybe this could be something that we should look at in terms of maybe reserving some of these funds, or temporarily even reserving the entire thing, until we know where this is going. And I'm putting that out there for conversation with the board, I guess.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, just follow up to that. So one more time from what we learned last week or last couple of weeks, this would be up to $45,000, correct? And what's that timeline for the, do we know, a rough timeline? Is
But
it,
I think what Commissioner Kravinoff is addressing is there's a cost to the judicial process in
yeah.
establishing this watershed district. Two things could happen. One, in the establishment, the state could refuse to allow the water district, which I think everyone here, including Mr. Melton, agrees is probably highly unlikely. Which at that point we would become responsible, either one, for that cost, or in the event that by statute, it states that the courts will pay for that, but realistically will probably fall back on the county. The estimate that was provided by Mr. Marks was between $150,000 and $300,000, and also the estimate was based off the percentage of population in Clay County, which would be about 15%. And so, based on that example, we were talking about a $45,000 maximum amount. But again, that could shift depending on cost and the agreed upon percentage that we worked with Polk and Norman on.
okay. Then, last part, so I did visit with you two on Thursday, and thank you for that. You answered a lot of questions, and my concern when we first started out was not so much the lines to the cities, but the lines that potentially go to the private parcels. And in the fact, could there be assessment overlay to those things? And I guess at this point, everything looks to be that if these trunk lines go to these cities, there is no cost to them along the way. And then, of course, if there would be opportunity to go into those trunk lines by them, then it would be assessed at that time. That's the way I read that. And I was comfortable with that. I know what Commissioner Campbell was earlier in your talking points there. We were talking about the future, the phases. And we had a discussion about that a little bit too. I think that we don't know what this brings, right, until it starts. So it's down the road a little bit, but I think even to the governance, piece of it, how do we develop that plan as the phase grows larger? And so I don't feel like we're boxed in or locked in on anything at this point. But depending on the success of this as it starts in the north and starts moving down, we may find pockets throughout Clay County that are just low water supply, hard water, arsenic, all the above, where this could be real advantageous to certain areas that I think keeping an open mind about it, of its potential growth, and to your point, future water supplies. So.
Commissioner Krabenhoff, I know one of the governance, I know Clay County's concerns over governance and sort of regional bodies. One of the things we've talked about, and I think Norman County is bringing it to their next meeting too, is if we could form some sort of pre-district, at least advisory committee that each county could sort of appoint somebody to, so that we have a early discussions that to make sure that we're not headed down a wrong path that then it's tough to correct later on. But it's also, you guys have great questions, and so help to address some of that as we get through the process until the formal district is formed. Something like Commissioner Cameron, who chaired the Metro Flood diversion, before it was the diversion authority, it was like an informal group that we knew we had to have decisions and things that as a group that need to be made before you had the legal authority. And so we are hoping if this resolution is approved, you'd also consider one of you to join that sort of a pre-advisory group that could at least meet on some sort of regular basis with Norman and Polk and then maybe a couple of the representative cities. So we'd have some of these good discussions as a group.
Mr. Chair. That is, I think, really important in moving forward. There is the Red River Basin Commission has a Minnesota Joint Powers Committee that meets quarterly, and it's kind of informal, but talks a lot about potential projects that are coming up and the financial ask or the mitigation that might come with that. And I do know that they meet next Thursday, I believe it's the 4th. Might be worthwhile talking to Ted about having this on the agenda. I think we've kind of floated it around in the past, but seeing as there's some partners around that table, that would be helpful for discussion.
For sure. Yeah, we can reach out to Mr. Priester.
Okay.
Is this plan gonna be all at one time, all the towns have to wait for it to start up, or?
Well, that's a good question. One of the reasons, I'm eager about this pre-advisory committee is because, we have 3 requests in through the federal offices for funding. So, by the end of this year, we could potentially have, $10 million in construction funding from the federal government that, one, we'd need to match, but also, that's a lot of work to start planning and putting in. And obviously, some of these, point A to point B don't work unless you have, to point C as well. And so having that group to help decide and prioritize how this gets done is going to be important, because like you've seen that the map there, those are sort of preliminary ideas, but it takes some additional engineering and thought to how that chronologically works as well.
Yeah, okay. Because I know Felton is very concerned about their water supply. They're really way down. I mean, they're quite a ways away from the beginning of it, and I was just wondering.
And they've been very active on submitting for that federal dollars, and there were, one of the 4 federal earmarks that the Congresswoman submitted this year, and so I think they have a pretty good chance of getting some money through that. So it'd be good.
Mr. Chair, maybe Rocky, you could talk a little bit about some of the bills that you have in the state legislature also.
Sure, and I know Stephen knows the state stuff better. You were down there in St. Paul a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, so in the current state bonding bill, there's another $8.3 million for this first phase of construction. And then there's another $64 million for the rural phasing, that would be approved. If it gets approved in the bill, that would be for the following, I think 2025 is when those funds would be accessible. But the hope would be that, you know, if we end up making it through the state bonding bill process, we've had good buy-in from all our legislatures that this would be some money that would also be used as a match to our federal dollars. And we firmly believe, you know, if this right funding, you know, matrix comes through in the way that we're hoping, as well as cities applying individually, that essentially the rough framework of what you see on the map here would be done in one phase, other than the city of Neillsville may happen first. They've applied for their own funding sources, and they're ahead of the game of these other cities. So that's kind of the layout of what we have. You know, for potential funding, we have high hopes for the bonding bill. We have high hopes for the federal earmarks.
We've also had conversations with the state revolving fund, so to make sure we're on their priority list so that we can, you know, get the advantageous financing. But one of the reasons this district is so important is because we have so many different of these cities that have this need. We don't want everybody sort of trying to, you know, compete with each other, right?
Yeah.
If we can all go compete together, we're gonna.
Mr. Chair, if I can, so going to the question of a federal grant being a matching grant, or even from sometimes some of the state bonding, sometimes that also has a local match to it. It's probably not as high in terms of 50-50 or whatever, but so if you get this $10 million grant from the federal government that has matching funds, who's responsible for the matching funds?
So the three applicants were the city of Felton, I don't remember the dollar amount, so it was about 3 million that theirs was. Norman County submitted one for 5 million, and then I believe the city of Climax did for another 5 million. So they would be on, you know, they've sort of promised they can get the 20% match. That 20% can come from state funding, so it's not necessarily local, it's non-federal.
So the entity that we would be creating and be part of would not be the entity who would be responsible for the matching funds?
I think, you know, ideally at some point, the district would consume that work, depending on the timeline, and Mr.
But with the ability to assess?
Yes, yep. And so that, you know, at some point, they would take over that if it got done in time. You know, the federal budget's sort of not a great timeline of process, and so, you know, the district could be formed by then.
And again, I asked this question just because if that $10 million came in and the stipulation was, well, you got whatever that match is, and then if Clay County is determined to be 15% of that, that can get to be a significant number, you know, depending what the match is.
So I guess on that note and on that comment, so one thing that I mentioned is these cities are applying for separate individual funding as well. So each city is going to have the cost share for their leg of the transmission. And, you know, say, we'll use Felton for an example. They're going to be going through a PER process with another engineering firm. And in that, they are applying to, I believe it was 10, 12 different funding sources. So that 20% local share, you know, ideally, the leg to Felton would come from the city of Felton. No matter what, each of these cities, everyone is going to kind of have to pay their fair share. And that's where some of the local share would come from. So, I mean, no one's getting a free lunch out of the deal, is basically the way it shakes out.
I'm just trying to also protect Clay County's pocketbook a little bit here.
Right.
You know, you know, if there's, you know, if it was, for example, you know, I've seen some federal grants that are 50-50 grants. And if you get 10 million from that, it means you have to come up, you know, with an equal amount. And, you know, my simple math is 15% of 10 million is 1.5 million. And those get to be significant numbers that haven't been considered here. So that's why I asked those questions, just to be but Mr. Chair, I think based on our conversations here, I would move resolution 2023-13.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I guess I have one question. Daniel, would you be able to elaborate on these proceedings, on how the district boundary looks? I mean, is it locked in after this resolution? Can it move through the pier? What does the county have to go through? What processes or does the district have to go through if the county has additional interest south or, of the current boundary line per se?
So the judicial process will take some time, and theoretically by the end of that judicial process, you will establish an initial boundary for the district. And then to expand that process in the future, you would either require additional judicial authority, so filing some kind of request to the district court and a proposal explaining why that's needed and how it's going to be paid for and all of the things that we're kind of doing initially. It's also possible, depending upon the way that the public system gets set up and the governance gets set up, that could be done through the commission for the district if the commission applies for certain approval from the district court to be able to make those decisions without the district court. So complicated answer, but I think the bottom line is that the district that's being formed, initially through this process, there are options to expand it and to grow it based upon, the commission and the district court's kind of request and preference. That answer the question?
And maybe just, the reason we asked that question too is because some of the comments, about 15% and maybe 1 of 7 voting members, if you do want to expand that, that obviously shifts all that. Obviously, there's some financial risk, but then the population changes as well. Maybe the board makeup changes. And, as more of your county hears about this, maybe you do want to wrap around the metro area to the south. So some of those considerations are good to have over this next few months as the court process goes on to make sure we have the right border, because it's easier to do now.
That's what I was, oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
No, and I just wanted to say, I think that this discussion is good, and the consideration about, potential future costs is really important because they do exist depending upon where this goes. But I think the bottom line is that's where it would be really helpful to have some kind of informal multi-county, stakeholder group making some of these decisions. And there could even be some additional discussions had in that kind of framework before we file something with the district court. So that we don't want to wait too long, because this process it's going to take longer than we want it to. I can guarantee you that. But I don't want to file something until everybody who has a stake in this is comfortable and is on the same page.
I was just wondering whether it'd be better to do it now to include some more townships than wait until later to try and get into the group.
I know there's a motion and a second on the table. I do think it's probably pertinent for this board to talk about having some sort of representation from this board on a committee. Obviously, we don't know what the schedule is of that and how that looks, but we are active on committees that are far less active on pertinent issues. So not sure, Steve, if you've talked to.
No, we've had some conversations with Stephen and Rocky, and I do agree. I think that we should assign somebody with per diem and mileage for this. I think pertinent to the discussion that you guys are just having, I think it's important to have that discussion also with our different counties.
But if I guess, so going back to what Commissioner Gross just asked about, should we expand that? The motion that's on the table here is to, basically it is to join, right? And within that, if we establish this, for lack of a better term, work group that are member counties, and in that process, it would, if it allows Clay County time to maybe review what additional townships could be part of this, is that's not too late at that time to still incorporate it, is it? Or do we modify this resolution, or what happens?
It's a great question. Go ahead.
Maybe I'll take first stab at that, Stephen. So, again, I'm sorry to speak like a lawyer, but can't avoid it. So, my understanding is that the judicial process that we would commence, it would be the process by which the public water system will actually get established. And so I think the system, or the district that we're establishing, and the proposed boundary that we're establishing with this resolution, which is the identical resolution that the other counties adopted, is not set in stone, and that through the process that we would commence and the engineering report, et cetera, it could be proposed to be expanded at this first go around without having to come back and reopen it to expand it. Now, that's something, in light of this discussion, we would confirm and button up our analysis on that point before we file, but that is my understanding of how the process works. If it's not how the process works, or it's not clear that that's the process work, then the option would be to come back and amend this resolution and expand the scope before we do that. But I don't think that that's necessary. I will say that this statute is not clear. It's not written. What was written 30 or 40 years ago, and it was written like a lawyer wrote it and didn't want anybody to understand it. So, but I think that the process is clear that there is multiple opportunities to open this up and to basically establish the public water system that the public needs to benefit the public health. So, and I think the initial process that we would propose to commence relatively soon here, the first step in that process is really the court appoints an engineer to do an analysis of what is actually needed. And there'll be public hearings about that, and that would be ample opportunity, I think, at that point to expand the scope from where we're at right now in the resolution before you.
This is why these things are complicated, and doing these things up front, sometimes there needs to be multiple questions. And for example, and I in the documents that I read, I saw that Norman County originally started, I believe they even started with the northern half of their county or something, and they just decided to expand and include their entire county, right?
Yeah, when they went to pass the resolution, that's
Yeah.
when they chose.
So that goes to Mr. Gross's question about the other side of that. If Clay County were to do that same thing, that really changes your formulas.
Yeah.
Because now all of a sudden, when we talked about it in terms of a 15% population base.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
That would change that incredibly. That could also really put a potential larger fiscal responsibility on to Clay County too. So it's that doesn't take away from that there might be needs. You could take the incorporated areas of Clay County and all the way around them, you could have water issues similar to what they're experiencing in the northern part. But
And
you know, how do
Commissioner,
we
if I may-
incorporate all of Clay County and then we're all of a sudden, we're the big brother in the project, you know?
Commissioner, if I may, I think you're asking the right questions and you're thinking about it the right way. And I think that, and I don't want to overstep my bounds, but I think it makes sense to start small and expand as needed. And the reason I think that makes sense is because there's really two ways to expand. You can expand the formal district, which is the legal entity, and make it larger. But let's say the district that we form is it gets formed and the public water system gets established consistent with the resolution that's before you. There's nothing that would prevent the district from then just contracting with other communities, townships in the county for water service without making them a formal part of the district. Now, that might be a disadvantage in some way because they wouldn't have governance authority over the district, but they would still be able to access water, reasonable rates and all that. So I think there's a lot of flexibility as it unfolds, and I think your instincts to keep it focused to where you have identified need makes a lot of sense.
Well, Mr. Chair, I have a resolution on the floor, and I'm going to stand by that, but I really appreciate what was the comment that were made here that, and it goes to what Commissioner Mojo also said, if we have somebody delegated by this board to work on this, again, on this management deal, and if in that time period, we might, through further dialogue, we might determine that there are other needs within Clay County that have not been expressed yet. And if we can include them before the final original district is established, that would be the ideal way to do it. And as long as that door is still open, I think it would be fair for us to move forward with this resolution. Is that a fairly accurate?
I think that would be a proper way of going about that approach, just because, you don't want to rush it. You want to feel comfortable in your decision-making process. You want to feel comfortable, and Clay County can feel comfortable in the direction that this district's going, and, all of the residents of the county are in the know as much as possible, because obviously with anything like this, transparency is key. So I think that would be a great way to go about doing the approach in my mind.
Okay. Dave, you have something else?
Yeah, it sounds to me that the governance in this is a work in progress. However, there are great parameters that are being set on how that work is going to take place. We get to a bottom line is sometimes we forget what local government is for, but it's to provide necessary and essential services. And if your well has got arsenic in it, you got a problem. And if you got a problem, we got a problem. It's one of those fundamental things government provides: roads, water, electricity, schools. And I think this is a great opportunity for us. As it develops, if there are other parts of the county that need this, they can be included and should be included. But I think this is something that moving forward, I agree if there's going to be basically a work group to get things started, we need a commissioner on it. I think that this is a need within Clay County, and we need support addressing that need. So the motion that's on the floor right now is well justified for us to go ahead and vote on it.
I guess my concern was just that we could add people to it, or townships to it. I think that's an important part, because it's just been two emails I received, but there are concerns out there, so if they got water problems, someone else does too. Okay, we got a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, opposed? Very good. Any
Go ahead.
comments?
Didn't say anything.
Okay,
So if I may,
go ahead.
with that pass, so can we move forward with those appointments at this time? I think it would be appropriate. You're mentioning one, but my mind is going with two, and I suggest it would be Commissioner Campbell, Commissioner Gross, as you cover those areas as part of your districts, if you see it needed to have two. Otherwise, maybe I'll leave that between the two if you want one or two. But I think you're the ones that are going to be, between the two of you, you're going to be the most interactive with the constituents you have in that area.
Is that a motion or?
I'll make a motion then, yeah, for both of you to be part of any of the work group materials that, in its development stage.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Maybe if I could, you know, I don't know to what degree the other counties will want to have, how they want to have the makeup of that. Certainly, if, you know, if they were to know that there's going to be two from here, that might establish how the group size might be. The other thing would be is there would be the potential for Frank to be the person and then have an alternate. You know, I think that's also another, we could probably start this way, and in the event that the feedback is they just want one, then we could modify that,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's fine. So if you want that, following that order, if need be, if two's too many, then I designate Frank as primary and then you're the alternate then.
I'll accept that in the motion.
Mr. Chair, just a clarification, I think for our Jackie, it's probably would be helpful if we name it, you know, I don't know if it would be that West Central Regional Water District Ad Hoc Committee. I think it would also be appropriate to include in the motion per diem as needed.
Be fine.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Very good.
Mr. Chair, one other order of business, and I get on this, and I really think it goes to the funding, and I really think it would be important for us to be considering where some of these potential dollars could come from. And as I mentioned, we have this assistance fund that's part of ARPA. I think this would be an excellent place, and I think if I would like to make a motion that we just reserve those funds at this time until we have further information on the total cash involvement by the financial participation by Clay County.
Okay, we got a motion to reserve funds from the ARPA. There's a second on that?
I'll second that for discussion. I do know we have an ARPA request coming, so we should have a committee meeting on that, and maybe we could further discuss that piece at the.
And
I guess that would be my comment, you know, I think we need to go through the ARPA committee to see if funds are there.
Madam Chair or Mr. Chair and Commissioner Mojo, one of the, you know, within our ARPA committee, the total dollars that we had been using in there never included. That was never part, this is a separate group of ARPA money that's distinguished outside of the ARPA dollars that we've been dealing with as a committee. It's never been that $100,000 has never been part of what ARPA previously even considered to use. It's a separate pool that Clay County has discretion, right? And
yeah, correct. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Campbell, that is true. We have roughly between our reserve for public health and our remaining dollars, we have about $400,000 remaining in our ARPA funds. This $100,000 is part of the federal ARPA umbrella, but it's not specific to that fund. And so this is an additional $100,000. Just for the board's understanding, it has great latitude in its usage, and it actually highlights specifically water projects such as this as a justifiable reason to utilize it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess and I'm fine with that. I guess my issue is that in the memo, when there's a cost impact funding source and it says TBD, never in there does it explain the funding amount and the source. You know, I think we're arguing over it, we're splitting hairs here, but it's just maybe a matter of protocol.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Mojo, we do have to have an upcoming meeting, or we have an upcoming meeting scheduled on ARPA, and if it was the board's wishes, we certainly could cover it at that point.
So if this ends up being part of the reserves, is there a timeline then with this, or just it stays on the books as part of the reserve?
Well, I think all ARPA funds have a time frame where they have to be spent by. And again, I just want to emphasize, and if you want that to go back to ARPA, that's fine, but ARPA never previously even had this $100,000 under that committee for discussion to spend anyway. Again, I'm referring to this as a totally separate pool that ARPA never considered that it had as its resource.
All right.
So that's all I'm
So
saying.
we're voting on that $100,000 from ARPA.
Just to hold. And again, it's the local assistance and tribal fund dollars.
Very good, okay. Jackie, excuse me. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very
Nay.
good. Passes.
I think maybe you want to do a roll call. I think there was some,
Yeah.
Do a roll call, okay, Jackie, do a roll call on that.
Commissioner Campbell,
yes.
Commissioner Ebbinger,
No.
Commissioner Gross,
Yes.
Commissioner Krabanoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Mojo.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. All right, I think we're done. Thank you, Rocky, Steve.
Thank you, everyone.
You'll-
Okay, with that, we'll go into request approval, MOU with the Minnesota State University Moorhead for Violence Prevention Project.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Thanks for having me here this morning. Also here to assist in the presentation is Cara Gravely Stack with MSUM. I'd start this off by saying the MOU has been reviewed by our Assistant County Attorney Leeser, and he has approved it. And we are not going to be looking for any additional funds from the county or the Sheriff's Office for this MOU. This is for the Sheriff's Office to collaborate with the Moorhead Police Department and MSUM to assist in some education programs and prevention of sexual assault, domestic assault, any type of dating violence that would occur in MSUM campus. And we would be doing that with and in collaboration with MSUM and the Moorhead Police Department. I won't go into the entire MOU. I believe you've all received a copy for review. But I would turn it over to Ms. Gravely Stack at this time to talk about the grant and their envisioning of it as well.
Okay.
Thank you. So we are working on a 3-year grant through the Department of Justice's Office on the Violence Against Women. And that's, if we are successful in getting that grant, we will be able to hire a staff member to specifically work on prevention and education on our campus. We're currently doing those efforts through committees that we work with and as add-ons to the staff time of our current staffing model, but we would love to develop some institutional capacity to have someone really focused on that. Probably the number one responsibility of that person is going to be creating a coordinated community response team. And that would be, again, members of the campus community, as well as seeking, if possible, some partnerships in the community through law enforcement, also our partners at Rape and Abuse Crisis Center as well, to be able to help us be strategic in addressing how we prevent incidents of sexual assault, domestic violence, how we educate our campus community about it, our students, and how we educate our faculty and staff on what signs to look for and how to support students who may be experiencing those incidents.
So I think this would be a MS employee?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Sounds great, and I ran an investigative unit years and years ago that was predicated on a lot of the work that the VAWA funding with the DOJ came from. I'm a big believer in it. There is what's been characterized as a conflict between law enforcement and prosecutors and the university system, and that's Title IX restrictions. Is there going to be any component of this where MSUM is going to take an initial response to incidents that occurred prior to law enforcement being involved? And if so, is this something that, I maybe address it to the sheriff, is this something that would interfere with an investigation or, possibly inhibit holding people accountable?
Would you like to add to that?
Sure. I'll start. So actually, I should have, in introducing myself, explained that I'm the Dean of Students at MSUM, and I'm the Title IX coordinator. So I do work with students who come forward and want to make a complaint about a Title IX, a sexual assault, domestic violence kind of situation. The way we operate that under Title IX is we make sure that our students who want to come forward, that they first of all know about all of the resources to help them, medical resources, mental health, advocacy through Rape and Abuse Crisis Center and such. And then we want to find out what their outcome is. What kind of outcome would they like? Do they want to address it on campus? Do they want to address it through the criminal process? We do not interfere with the criminal process. If the student wants to go through that process, and we've had a few students do that, we respect that process. And we can do our campus process at the conclusion of that, or at a particular time where our investigation does not impede the investigation through law enforcement. Our focus is trying to establish a sense of safety for the person who's experienced that. So we may put some safety procedures in place, but we do that in strong communication with Ryan Nelson, our MSUM Director of Public Safety, who has, I think, really good relationships with Moorhead PD and the Sheriff's Office as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, is there a mandated reporter status to this, to where if somebody comes forward and they indicate they don't want to report it, but you've still got to notify authorities of the occurrence?
Yeah, so there is, so we have a couple different federal laws that we work with. One is Clery, which focuses on our campus safety. It's the Campus Safety Act, and we are mandated to report incidents of violence that happen on campus or in the perimeter, and that would include sexual violence. We don't necessarily, through that, get involved in an investigation or anything. We are, once a year, we report to the federal government about how many incidents of different kinds of violence have happened on or near our campus. So there's mandated reporting for that. And then we also have faculty and staff who are encouraged to report. Typically, what we would do on our campus is we would not go against the wishes of the student. So if the student who's coming forward with a complaint does not want to, or who's coming forward having experienced this, if they do not want us to file a report or a complaint and go through our adjudication process, we won't do that. If they want us to, then we will. And if they want to go through the law enforcement, either at the same time or do that first, then we support them in that.
Okay.
Am I answering your question?
Yes. I don't think there's ever been, in my recollection, any conflict between Moorhead PD and any of our campuses on this. I know nationally it's been an issue. I know in my prior experience elsewhere it's been an issue. And, I think the education component of this and the police and sheriff's office working with the campus, certainly Ryan Nelson, who is an excellent detective with Moorhead PD for a number of years, I think that shows great opportunity for this to be a fruitful partnership. I just wanted to address those concerns that have happened. And Sheriff, if you got anything to add to that, I'd like to hear you out.
I would think that Ms. Gravely Stack has definitely explained that in detail. And as far as this MOU goes, I am in support of it. I think it would be good for us. We also have the MSUM Science Center out at the Buffalo River State Park, so this does fall within our area of jurisdiction as well.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, what about Concordia? Are they involved in any of this, or do we want to involve them, or do they do their own thing, or?
Right now, this is an MOU just with Moorhead State University, or sorry, Minnesota State University Moorhead. I have to change the thought process from years ago.
Okay.
Yes, and because it would be MSUM employee, it would just be with MSUM.
Okay, I just wondered whether they can apply for a grant too. Very good. Go ahead, Jenny.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just want to highlight a part of this document talks about the long-standing collaborative working relationship with all of the partners, and in the spirit of the partnerships that we continue to have in our community, I think this is a sad reason that we need to have a partnership like that, but certainly appreciate the spirit of elevating the awareness. I know that oftentimes students are in communities that they did not grow up in, and their community supports are often farther away. So to have something like this to give an empowerment to victims and an avenue for dealing with that is certainly quite valuable, and I'm grateful for it. So thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I make a motion that we enter into this agreement.
Okay, a motion to enter into the agreement with Minnesota State University Moorhead. Okay, and a second. Any further discussion on this?
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I would just like to point out that this would be anticipated to go into effect on October 1st, 2023, and would run till September 30th of 2026. And then I also have the signature page here where Chief Monroe and City Administrator Molly has already signed it, so I would just ask that we sign on this page as well, and I'll get that back to Ryan Nelson.
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gonna get that signed right away again. And the next thing we need is the funding of a purchase of a large skid steer. Corey?
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, or Mr. Chair. As you know, about a month ago, I was in and we requested funding for a skid steer. 2 weeks ago, I found out that skid steer won't go into production for a while, and they came back with a second option. The second option they gave us was a size larger skid steer. It comes with LED lights and a backup camera, which are both very nice safety features that we could have. And that model is in production currently. We still don't have an exact delivery date, but at least it's in production, and we will be getting it sooner rather than later. The additional cost for the larger machine is $4,056.15, so I'm here today to request the additional funds.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the request.
Second?
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just a comment, we will not regret going with the size up in tractor
Okay.
skid steer.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Go get her.
Thank you.
Okay, request approval to update the Clay County Development Code. Matt?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Commissioners. So I'm here today to request funding and approval to update the 2012 Clay County Development Code. So you all as a board has adopted the 2045 Clay County Comprehensive and Transportation Plan in 2022. If you look at Minnesota Statute 394.23, it states that within 3 years of updating the comprehensive plan, the county shall consider adopting ordinances as part of the county's official controls that encourage the implementation of goals and objectives of that plan. And so, just as our plan kind of lays out the vision and goals and objectives for development and land use in the county, the ordinance or the development code is kind of the main tool or approach that the county has to actually implement that comprehensive plan. It has also been over 10 years since our ordinance has been completely updated. There's been amendments, obviously, to the ordinance over the years. And so it's probably time to take a good hard look at doing a full update just to make sure that everything in it is in line with state and federal statutes and rules, as well as to make sure that what's currently in the code makes sense for the county, correct any inconsistencies or anything like that that's in our current code. And then again, one of our department goals is to try and make materials and things as accessible and as easy to use and understandable for the general public. And so part of that would be modernizing and updating this code to make sure that it is understandable to the public and easily accessible, to where you can go to our website and find the answer. You don't have to spend half an hour or hire a lawyer to try and figure out what you can and can't do and what the rules of the county are. I have been meeting with the planning team over at SRF, and then I've also had discussions with our staff and just over looking at our experience and working with the code on a daily basis, kind of identified some areas that could really serve as kind of the focus for an update. Those include just aligning it with the comprehensive plan. That's kind of the first start there. Looking at our land use table, so that's kind of the table that shows all of our zoning districts, and then a list of land uses, what would be prohibited, what would be allowed as a permitted use, what would require a conditional use permit, what would require an interim use permit. So updating that, and then any associated performance standards for those uses as well. Looking at nonconformities, so that would be properties or uses that were once in conformance with the code but are no longer due to an update. They're legally allowed to continue. There's some discrepancies between what our code says and what the state statute says on that. And then feedlot standards, making sure that those are consistent with feedlot rules. The shoreland ordinance and the floodplain ordinance. Those are probably two big ones, especially the floodplain ordinance. Getting those updated as well. And then finally, the renewable energy ordinance, just anticipating, that's been about 5 years since that's been updated, anticipating that we'll probably see some further growth in the county in that area as well. And so I had brought this to the Planning Commission last week for discussion, and they had made a recommendation or a motion or recommendation to you all as a board to continue to do this process, this update process, and then also to hire SRF Consulting to do the process. And I included their proposal letter in your materials as well. I've just been talking with them for maybe a year or two about this, about potentially doing a code update. They seem to have good knowledge of our code and then working in this region as well. So just asked what would their proposal be, and kind of this is what they gave me. So in the estimated cost on that would be $99,731 to update the code. Any questions for me at all?
How close would be, you think they'd be on sticking with that price, or is it gonna be higher, lower, or is that, of course, it says not to exceed.
That's not to exceed, yep.
Is it gonna be that, or is that?
I think it would, my guess would be, it's hard to say, but my guess would be if we say we wanted to, we got into the process and realized that we wanted to look at something else or update something else, then maybe it might, but if we're gonna stick with the tasks that they've scoped, I would say that it would be at or under that.
Any other questions?
Like for example, I have a feeling that the feedlot standards, they have that scoped out at about 10,500. I don't think it's gonna cost that much to do, for example.
Okay, Dave?
Yeah, see,
Turn it off.
one of your goals is to make this accessible and understandable. Is this going to be formatted so that we can make the document available online, or have an e-version of it for our use or for the use of the Planning Commission?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Eminger, my goal would be to work with our Information Services Department and get this rolled in with kind of the Civics Plus and how we do our website, to where you can actually just search, do like, almost like you would be doing a Google search of the code, and it would bring up exactly the parts of the code that you might be looking for. So if you wanted to build a storage shed in a shoreland area, you would be able to just type that in, and it would point you or bring up the relevant parts of the code. That would be my ultimate goal, and I think that is something that's doable.
Would that be something within this body of work that we'd be able to take to IT and get that loaded and done?
Yeah, my understanding is yes, we'd be able to do that.
Mr. Chair, I'm glad this was discussed at the Planning Commission, and I think updating that is important for the work that they do as well. They see these things firsthand and what needs to be done. So, and at the same point in time, I also agree on here under the cost impact and the funding source to be out of reserves. Again, I've said this before, I think this is something that pertains to multiple years of benefit, as opposed to suggesting that it would come out of one line item during one budget process. So I certainly concur with the funding coming from reserves. If there's no further discussion, I would move that we move forward with this contract with the funds coming from reserves.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we got a motion, a second, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. And at some point, we'll have to form a study review committee to get this process going. So I'll likely be coming back to you with that for approval as well in the near future.
Okay, very good.
All right, thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move to committee reports. Jenny, you want to start us out today?
Sure. Just pulling up my agenda, sorry. Last week, I attended the Planning Commission meeting, and we talked, I'm gonna have to come back to that report, my agenda's not opening. I did attend the Clay County Management Retreat meeting last Thursday. We had a great day of conversation and planning, and just want to thank the, is it the Strive Committee for the work that they did to plan that day. And Jackie, you have a wonderful mom who did a fantastic job with the planning. The apple doesn't fall far from that tree, but really was helpful in talking about our leadership team and how we all work our best and how we can coordinate and collaborate to achieve the best goal possible for the Clay County citizens. Some great ideas came out of that planning session. I maintain that that is a fantastic opportunity for us as a board to get to see the management group in action and help them with their departments. So thank you for the work that went into that. And then attended the MetroCog Policy Committee meeting. We did have the consent agenda that passed, took action on the Safe Streets and Roads RFP, did talk about and take action on the electric vehicle readiness study. There's some significant concern if the electric vehicle initiative, well, as it progresses and puts more vehicles on the road, those vehicles are substantially heavier than normal vehicles. And so how do we take into account that as we plan our projects going forward? Did have a action item on the I-94 and 20th Street interchange analysis. That's a tricky one, but as growth is happening, that's one that's important to address. And then there's a long discussion on the West Metro Perimeter Highway Study that in effect would connect I-94 and I-29 on the west side of the metro area. And I know our engineer's not here, but it seems to me that the discussion that I recall happening always had included kind of a Minnesota side plan for that interchange. And it seemed to make the most sense with the diversion project going into account. There's a long conversation about how that perimeter interchange would really change what's hoped for with the extra space that the diversion project on the North Dakota side has. I know there's been a rec plan discussion, and if adding a interstate interchange would really hinder what that would be. Just making sure that I know our engineers and Matt as well as on the Transportation Technical Committee, but I think it will require some creativity and thinking outside of the box and how we deal with that. I know that you don't want to divert that traffic from the metro, but certainly larger cities have done so, and it seems to be a good thoroughfare. It also eases the strain on our internal systems. I know that two of you are on our highway committee, so just make sure that we're keeping that top of mind as we think about how we grow as a metro. And then yesterday, I attended the Lakeland Mental Health Center board meeting. We did finally have our audit present. We had worked with Red Path this year. We're really happy with that. We did talk a little bit about there's some policy changes. We had some major systems changes in accounting for grants in 2023, and that was reflected in the audit. Certainly, they maintain that they're in the audit identified that they're in great position, so glad to see that. They currently have 32 fleets in their car lease. There was some changes in how that is reported, but overall, strong report there, so we did approve the audit. We had updates from the collaborative. Otter Tail did just receive a resignation of their director. I know Clay County Collaborative is, I think, offering a position shortly to that. I know that's been problematic to fill, but they're currently working on a We Matter initiative that is really helpful within the schools, so it was good to hear that report. The access indicators for the centers continue to be really positive and clients able to access therapy supports quite soon, which is always good. They have had some internal turnover, not internal, but job openings, and so it's been good to see that they've been able to address that virtually so that the wait times don't get too crazy. And they are working with pay grant through the Berry Foundation. They approved that. It's a philanthropy in youth, so our school-aged kiddos were able to apply for that and get that, and that goes to get some therapy supports for our kids in our schools. We had a long employee recognition, which was great. They just have such amazing staff at Lakeland through all the centers, and it was really it's always nice to be able to meet the employees that are working there. And I'm going to have you come back to me on the planning piece because my agenda is not opening.
Okay, 'cause I know you got big committee too. Okay, very good. Kevin?
Thank you. Thursday, April 20th, I also attended the county leadership retreat, and Strive for Excellence group did a great job in planning that out, and we had an excellent program with an excellent leadership. And then the next day, we had another meeting. It was diversion related with, this time we had Terry Williams from the Army Corps was here. If you recall, the last meeting I gave an update on the township issues with Holy Cross Township, and those, they had wanted to have 150th and 170th become up and overs, and the Corps had replied to them that that was not doable. In the meantime, we then contacted, we had conversations with the Corps from the county perspective, Dave and I as being diversion authority members. And we, and part of their issues is they'd have to do these bubble outs because of how close it was to Highway 75 and for safety for coming up and over. And so we proposed just doing a minor alignment to 150th, which would put that back where it wouldn't require a bubble out, and then it would allow for an up and over. So Terry Williams was here last week, all week, and so she attended our meeting, and she has basically given an approval for that over on 150th. There are some caveats and conditions with that, and last time I reported, I think I misspoke because I thought at that time they were 35% done with design. I think I stated that at our last meeting. It turns out it's 65% done, so it's significantly important. And so they really, the Corps is open to this, but they really want all of this brought together with Holy Cross and some sort of an agreement. And I think she said that they wanted to have it by May 11th. So there was a letter that went out, I believe yesterday, by Joel Paulson, inviting Holy Cross Township to come and talk about these issues. And it pertains to that crossing. Unfortunately, the Corps is, they are sticking to their guns regarding 170th. They do not believe that one can work. But it certainly is something moving in the right direction for Holy Cross Township, the fact that the Corps has opened up to that. In the entire North Dakota side, they only have one crossing in the entire North Dakota side, and I think on our side now with this one, I think there'd be 3. So they are, giving us some attention. And Commissioner Mosher, I know that's your area there, and certainly as this develops, we'll kind of keep you informed, but I know there's some stipulations on this from the Corps standpoint in terms of timing. And again, why there's timing on this is part of the construction for Reach 4 is used for another portion of the project that also has a timeline period that can't be, so the timeline on this is really significant. And in terms so we had a really good conversation last Friday, and there's some research that's going on, and as you know, the MCC-JPI is the agency, the Minnesota agency that acquires the lands. And when we originally, we actually already have the lands on the 2 properties involved. The only thing is that we may have to move, they're going to have to move that a little bit to make that work. And so they were checking within the original, in most of the documents that we had on Reach 4, when we acquired those with the stipulation that the alignment wasn't final and that we may have to move it. And so I believe in those agreements, there states that they agreed to that, but they would be compensated the same way as the previous lands that we anticipated would be needed. So I know Jody Smith is working on the legalities of what those contracts were. We're hopeful that we don't even have to go in and open up any new contracts. And then Commissioner Moser, the other piece of that you're familiar with is that there was also then a need to have an access road put on the, basically the wet side of the dam, for lack of a better term, and that was a 3-mile access road. And they're not sure, or we were hoping that with this crossover that maybe one of those miles could be eliminated. There was one small piece of a parcel that would not be able to be reached, but it's owned by the same landowner on the south 2 miles. So there's some, and the reason I bring this up is because it's still part of the design process that the Corps has to do. And so one of the suggestions that I made to them is, well, could that road be designed in a way where it would be not in the permanent footprint of the dam safety permit, which would then at some point in time give maybe the township, say 5 years from now, could deem that township road wasn't necessary, and then they could vacate it. So we're trying to see if all that can be incorporated, and then it would become just a township issue, and they wouldn't have to go to get the Corps' permission or anything like that. And so that was something that Terry hadn't really heard of before, but in talking about, she thought that it was potentially feasible to do that. They could go right up to that. So
Just toss in addition to that, if that isn't possible, or during the time that they'd have to have the road, arrangements could be made to where the diversion authority would reimburse the township for the maintenance of that road as well. So it'd be at zero cost to them, whether it's 2 or 3 miles.
right, yeah. So so ultimately, what needs to be done here, and where they on this deal by May 11th, is there's an MOU that needs to be done, a memorandum of understanding of all these different issues, and included in that, of course, is the ownership and maintenance of that new road that access road that'd be constructed. And we believe that that should go to the township. The township should own it, but at the same time, within the MOU, the diversion authority is willing to state that they will do all maintenance on that road. And so what typically would happen is the township would put it on its annual road maintenance with the county. The county would do it. The county would bill per mile, whether it's a winter maintenance or no winter maintenance road. And so the county would bill the township, and then there would be within the MOU, then it would then go to the diversion authority for reimbursement. So there's, like Dave said, there's no financial responsibility for that new road that would be created. So that's kind of where it's at right now. I think that letter from Joel Paulson went out to them yesterday. They were hoping that even by the end of this week, there could be a meeting established to talk about it. That's kind of a really involved deal there. So, and then yesterday we did have our building committee meeting regarding the DMV, and we continue to, and we did have at that meeting met somebody from the state that was there in terms of what their square footage needs are and what they're planning for. The current design has about 1,200 square feet for them within this deal, and then it pretty much was based on layout and all of that type of stuff going forward, and to ultimately come up with our total square footage. And I guess I'll leave it if Commissioner Gross wants to add anything more on that. But I think they said that Klein McCarthy, that within the next 30 to 60 days they could have something that's designed and visual for the full board to see. And again, it's something that we're looking at designing that could be, it could be put on a parcel that we have now or someplace else, but it's the concept of what it would look like. So that concludes my report.
Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wednesday, the 19th, I met with Matt Jacobson, Justin Sorum, and Steve Larson, just as a preparatory briefing regarding a meeting that the EDC requested with myself and Commissioner Krabenhoff on some issues involving Terracon out in Spring Prairie Township, some road work there and some things they want to discuss. And that meeting has been set, and I don't have my calendar in front of me, but be a week or two. Sir? The 5th of May, and we'll discuss some issues concerned to the folks out there. Thursday, I attended the
If I can, just to, you know, as you meet on that with EDC, just to be aware that our Highway Tracking Committee has also been working a lot on that deal. So I think it would be important to understand, you know, where the Highway Tracking Committee has been working on this as well.
I can get with you. I really was pleased that I got the information I did from our staff. Matt and Justin really gave an overview that I think set a good boundaries on what can be done and what can't. But I'll get with you.
And Commissioner Grossi, he's been heavily involved with that up there as well. So you might want to work more with him. It's his area up there, and he's also on the highway tracking, so.
Okay.
And Steve, you're part of that meeting also, right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, so you'd have some knowledge also, yeah.
And, yeah, Steve will be part of the meeting. Okay, I attended the management retreat. Again, compliments to Ermedine Hanson, your mom, Jackie. She did a really good job. And one of the things I was very impressed with during that whole process was our staff. We've got great leaders within our employee groups. You get to see it. The relationship we have is good, but it's nice to get in there and just to collaborate with them, have the discussions, and it just reinforces what a good bunch of people we have working for us. Later that day, I attended the Lake Agassiz Library Executive and Finance Committee meetings. Pretty much standard on the financial report. We're on budget. We did a preliminary review of the 2024 budget. No surprises. Later, we looked at some legislation that's pending and where it stands. There's been a real problem getting state funding for regional libraries. There was a request for $4 million increase in funding. At this point, the Senate's looking at 4, the House is looking at 2 in the Education Omnibus Bill. And library funding comes through the education bill, so it's always kind of the stepchild on these things. House and Senate included a 2.75 annual allotment in the Legacy Omnibus Bill. Then that's in response to a request for $3 million. So we continue to try and get proper funding for our regional libraries. On Friday, the 22nd, I attended the meeting we had with Steve Larson, Kevin Campbell, Bob Zimmerman, Justin Sorum, and then Terry Williams from Corps of Engineers, and Chris Backengard and Jody Smith from the Diversion Authority. Commissioner Campbell did a good job of describing what we're doing and what we're looking at on that out in Holy Cross Township. Really we were pleasantly surprised, or pleasantly affirmed that the Corps of Engineers is willing to listen and make some adjustments to this, but we got to bear it in light of the caveat that the engineering's been done, the planning's been done, it's got to be tweaked, so there's a timeline that's pretty close. And again, the letter went out yesterday, and hopefully we'll get a timely response, and we'll be able to get everybody on board and pointed in the right direction. Saturday, the 22nd, Senator Klobuchar visited the area. Myself and Commissioner Krabenhoff attended the initial meeting that was at the Umkomst. Mayor Carlson and a number of Moorhead officials were there. Dr. Zimmerman, Bob Zimmerman, the city engineer, did a good job. It was pretty much a cheerful meeting because they had just come out with the new crest level and when it was going to happen, and we knew we have flood, but nothing we couldn't deal with. So it was kind of upbeat, but there was a lot of discussion about how the infrastructure changes that have been made using state funds within the city of Moorhead actually saved the city of Moorhead from having to produce. If they had not had those changes, they would have had to anticipate producing 750,000 sandbags that would cost about $1 million, and every one of them would be dry because the forecast changed. As it stood, the infrastructure was there, and they knew that if there was a flood as originally predicted, the infrastructure would have been able to deal with it. So the preparatory issues on that were no longer necessary. I did have the conversation with Mayor Carlson, and we're doing this as a team moving forward with the Diversion Authority, but there's still funding needs in the county, our rural areas where we need to be able to respond to that, and funding is being looked at in the legislature. I'm not sure what Representative Joy's bill right now, what the status is, but the job is not completed yet. There's still things out in our county areas that need to be addressed, and that's a work in progress. We went out from the Umkomst, we went to Horn Park, looked at some of the infrastructure that's been built there, the lift stations, the dike, walked about a mile of the dike, and it was a little breezy, but we made it, and had a press conference there. Overall, was just, again, kind of an upbeat day when you find out that the senator came to see a river that was about to bust its banks, and we just had one that was moving pretty quick, so that's good news. And that completes my report.
Paul?
On the Tuesday, the 18th, I had the Adult Mental Health LAC meeting. Good conversation, went through our monthly reports. Main thing is we are working on, the group has been working on the report that will be given to us next meeting, May 2nd. Steve, on the agenda. And that'll be their report to the commission here of the work that's been done with that LEC. Look forward to that. Also, just know there's outreach that comes out of that group at certain events. So we've got people in place for Breakfast on the Farm, Clay County Fair, and Dilworth Local Days in Dilworth. Frank, be there.
Okay. I'll try.
All right. The next day, Wednesday the 19th, I had the our monthly board meeting for the Historical and Cultural Society of Clay County. Did our normal business, all in good shape, and then planning is in place right now, and we had a discussion about the annual meeting for the HCSC annual meeting on June 1st. So that'll be coming up. And then also, one thing I really enjoy is being part of the board. Every month we have something as an education piece, and Mark Peel is always so fun to listen to, and so much depth. And anyway, it was about Clay County newspapers through the years, and how actually The first Clay County newspaper started in 1872. And going back, and then, I hope that I have this right, but Moorhead over the time had 5 newspapers over the years, so before now we have the form. But we certainly enjoy the, extra that's local right here too, as well as our other county newspapers that in up in Ulen and Pauley and Barnesville. With that, the management retreat, well discussed. I too enjoyed being with everyone and just seeing my first chance to really see the whole group, and what a good culture we have in Clay County. And I just very engaging, and it was just really good to be around. And it's always good to have training on leadership skills, and certainly that applied to them, and it applies to us here on the board. So glad to be part of that. Friday the 21st, I had the Early Childhood Initiative monthly meeting, also another very active group. The main thing I want to talk about right now is just that their upcoming event on May 6th, which is only a couple weeks away, will be the Kids Fest, which they hold annually at the library. And they're getting that all set up. So put that on your calendar if you have some young children, and go on over there. It's going to be a very interactive time at the library on May 6th. And that will be, I think there are a couple things inside, but most of it will be outside in the parking lot, weather permitting. Commissioner Ebinger spoke very well about the meeting with Senator Klobuchar, and our talk we had at the MCON, as well as the tour. I always want to shout out, just because a good friend, the good work that Ben Lean is now doing as her outreach director for our area, and having him been our rep and knowing him pretty well. It's just nice to have that closer connection in outreach to the senator. Let's see. And yesterday I had the Cascade Lake Food Commission Steering Committee. Again, we're gearing up, making the agenda moving forward for the Food Commission meeting, which will be on May 10th at Fargo Commission Chambers from 10:30 to 12 o'clock. Please join us. And we continue our discussion always about not only food distribution, but all sorts of where foods come from. It's amazing the number of gardens and food markets and those type things that are available through Clay and Cass County. It's a tremendous community effort. It continues to be right now a real challenge to keep the Great Plains Food Bank full. They're having to rely more and more on donations, but again, hopefully that's something that will straighten out over time. Then the last thing I want to report, this morning, the MBA had a meeting at the Village Inn, and the topic today, this is on business, and it was Let's Talk Business, and the West Central Minnesota Small Business Development Center, and their regional director, Ian Carlstrom, spoke and did a great overview report of the Small Business Center. This used to be located at Concordia and has now been moved over to M State, and hope it will probably be there for a while. But what a great resource for people that are looking at upstarts, in Clay County for business throughout the county. The initial work and setup is all free. Now, this money comes from federal grants through the small business SBA out of the federal government, and then also state money coming through Minnesota deed group. So anyway, very good presentation by them, and once again, it's about 50/50 they work with as far as startup companies as well as existing companies throughout their development, and then even to the end of setting up a business when one is planning on retire a small business, how to keep that value up so that it's a product that could be sellable and keeping that up. So that concludes my report.
Ready to go again, John?
Yes, I apologize for that. The Planning Commission meeting last week heard 2 requests for interim use. One, well, this is the same parcel. The first was to seek an interim use mining permit to open a gravel mining operation in Keene Township. That did pass. There was comments from the township to ask that we aligned the operating times the same as the other mines within the township. We did pass with those recommendations. And then after that passed, there was a request for an interim use to open a hot mix asphalt batch plant on that same property, and that also passed. The unfinished business was that we discussed the membership geographical allocation, excuse me. This board had discussed the potential of adding a caveat to the membership list to include a representative from east of Clay County Highway 9 and west of Clay County Highway 9, since Oakport Township and Moorhead Township has dwindled so much in population, making sure that we address that in the bylaws, and that did pass. We discussed the Clay County Development Code update, and this board took action on that. So that concludes the Planning Commission. And just an item of note, the pollinator patio party that the Soil and Water Conservation District does in partnership with Pheasants Forever and Three Bears Honey Company will be at the junkyard this evening from 4 to 7 p.m. An opportunity to learn about pollinators, raise money for our pollinator habitat that we partnered with them and the Crestwood site and south of the Convent Road. So planting some pollinators, learning about that, having a special brew that our local entities have collaborated with. Just a highlight that that is family friendly. It's an opportunity to attend, so.
Okay, thank you. All right, Tuesday, we had the PIC committee, Information Services, Mark Sloan talked about changing the name of their department. They want to change it to GIS and Communications Department, so talked about that. We'll come, it'll come forward with a request to do that. Request to have an assistant supervisor at the DMV. And the Public Health Department's request to have a part-time variable hour employee to head the community opioid efforts. And we talked about the Clay County inclement weather policy, whether make any changes to that or not. Wednesday, I went to the drug court graduation, another very good graduation ceremony. A guy, that graduated, is really going to be, he's really recovered. When he talked about using drugs since he was 12 years old, and he's 24 years old now, so he recovered very well and has just really got his life in shape now. It's really good to go to those graduations. Thursday, of course, I was at the leadership retreat. I was disappointed that I came out as a dog. But I'll overcome that. Yeah, it was a golden retriever, I guess, but it was still a disappointment.
You're lovable, Frank.
You're a golden.
What did you want to
Golden
be?
retriever.
Golden retriever, yes.
You love dogs.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good retreat. It's been reported on enough, I guess. Yesterday morning, I attended the legislative update put on by AMC at 9. I think everybody from AMC talked except Julie Ring is the only one. There was 9 different presenters, and they all explained how all the bills are coming through Congress, and made me worried after listening to all of them, whether they're going to get anything done by the end of May. So a bit concerned after listening to that report. Yesterday afternoon, we had with the DMV, if you look, if you want to look at some of the designs that we've come up with, I've got a copy of it here. They came up with a couple of different designs, and we sort of went with one design, and with a few modifications to it, and it's coming along good, you know. I think we just got to decide whether we can find a place, whether they got to build a place, and where the money's coming from and all that, so. Other concerns, I had several calls on the roads up there, Spring Prairie Township. I went up there with Justin Storm and looked around and drove the area somewhat, so I can see why they got concerns, so, but it's spring, it's flood time. Okay, Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last Tuesday, I participated in the PIC meeting that's been covered already at this point. Just a note for the board's knowledge, we receive plenty of bills. It's not often that we receive a surprise check. We did receive a check last week for $17,000 and change from a class action lawsuit from Monistat or Roundup versus the City of Long Beach as a county entity, a government entity. We were automatically opted into that, and we received a little over $17,000 for PCB chemicals that were utilized in Roundup between 1930 and 1977. So we did, on the 18th, also submitted a number of letters to our governor and legislator in regards to the importance of the transportation funding that we discussed last week. I participated on the 19th, the Spring Prairie discussion that Commissioner Ebinger touched on earlier. That afternoon, I also participated in the local homeless prevention aid RFP response. Rhonda will be bringing forward a recommendation here probably as early as next week. One of the great things that we'll hear about is our local providers really got together to work together to present an RFP that will be brought forward again next week. I participated again in the management retreat. Again, thank you to the commission for your continued support on being able to provide that. It's wonderful. You guys talked about how it's fun to be around our leadership group. It's also really important that and appreciated that you guys are there. And so thank you guys for your commitment to continuing to foster those types of experiences here at the county. We are working on a short survey. I think that for those that participated, that will be receiving that. So on the 21st, participated, and thank you to the Strive Committee again for all the work that they do, not just for this committee, but again, throughout the year. 21st, I participated in the Southern Embankment discussion that Commissioner Campbell, Commissioner Ebinger touched on. On Friday, or yesterday, excuse me, we had some ongoing discussions with the communications department moving forward. I participated in the DMV planning meeting, and as was mentioned, hopefully by the end of December, we'll have a final project or an estimate, or initial estimate, excuse me, for that project. Just a couple other items to touch base on. There is going to be a public hearing for considering acceptance or adoption of the Moorhead Municipal Airport Zoning Board on May 10th at 4:30 at the MCOMS. As this board's aware, we had two representatives as part of that zoning board, and Mr. Jacobson, and also our citizen was Steve Moore through Moorhead School District. So that's coming up. Two other items for your consideration. Just looking ahead at the schedule, July 4th this year falls on a Tuesday. And so from a board standpoint, I guess you're just looking for some insight of how you'd like to handle that, whether that's shifting it to a different day, whether that's not holding the meeting that week at all. And so maybe just get some of your insight there.
How many Tuesdays are in June?
So the fifth Tuesday is in August this year. So there's just four in the other.
Need a motion on that. I'll make a motion to cancel the meeting.
Okay, I'll second the motion.
Okay.
Any discussion?
You're the boss.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. And then my last thing, just notification, and I guess you can talk to me offline if any other thoughts is, if you recall back in June 21st of last year, we appointed Justin Sorum to be our county engineer. By statute, we were allowed on that first appointment to do it for a maximum of 1 year before we look to the 4-year appointments. By statute, we're required to make that appointment during May of the year. And so unless the board has any other wishes, I would be bringing forward that next week for your consideration.
Yeah, I'd like to have that on the agenda, the first meeting in May.
Okay.
And that concludes my report.
Maybe just to follow up on that piece, I know that we've had an assistant county engineer position open for a substantial amount of time, and maybe in collaboration with that appointment, maybe just looking at if there's anything we need to tweak in that opening. Justin does a fantastic job, but that's really a department that really needs to have an assistant engineer as well. So I'm not sure if we can add anything, Darren, to that application.
Brian, you got anything?
I just want to also clarify, I was at the PIC committee with you and Steve. I'm just not on my A game today, sorry.
Okay. Jackie, any instructions for us? Okay. Very good. We're adjourned.